Hello, welcome to the Noobs Cage. We have a podcast now with HD Moore. He is the creator of Metasploit. A lot of our community are excited to have you here. We have a lot of members here, the Booksec and Illuminati. So the first question is, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, the second question is about Metasploit. What is Metasploit for you? Not the technical details. For you, it's a project, it's a way of life, it's a tool, it's a maybe a package of exploits. What can you tell us about Metasploit?
The goal of Metasploit was to make sure that exploits stay legal and you don't get prosecuted for writing exploits. And the approach was we will just release so many exploits so quickly that it becomes normal and it no longer becomes something scary. It just becomes what you do.
Bien, básicamente nos comenta que pues él lo que quiere es que nadie vaya a la cárcel por el desarrollo de exploits y que bueno, que pueda haber como un conglomerado de los mismos.
What inspired you to get into cybersecurity and how did you first start in the world of hacking?
I am old. So, when I started security stuff, it was mid 90s, 1995, and there were no jobs for security. There was no training for security. You're just hackers. Like you just hack stuff. So my background was, in wares groups, trading software, doing other kind of terrible things, war dialing, BBSs, freaking IRC, things like that. And from that community, that's kind of where you kind of learn the ropes for what to do and what not to do. But also that's kind of where the entire security industry came from, is from those early days of hackers on the internet.
Bien, nos comenta un poquito que pues prácticamente él ya empezó hace algunos ayeres, que viene de todo el rumbo de los BBS, de hecho ha sido conferencista en DEFCON, ha estado también con Fyodor de Nmap, entonces pues sí es una persona que le apasiona esto desde hace mucho tiempo. Turno, Tomás.
Hi, HD. First of all, it's amazing to have you here. My question is, if you could redesign Metasploit today, incorporating all the current technology advancements, what will the ultimate version of this tool look like? One that redefine offensive security for this time.
Good question. I mean, Metasploit was a product of the time. So we focused on Windows shellcode early on because that's what was needed. Then we did Internet Explorer exploits, thousands of those, like lots of vulnerabilities in browsers, then lots of server-side exploits, and kind of on from there. And the reason was that's kind of what was happening. That was what people were using to break in then those days. So these days, there's a lot more cloud. There's a lot more silly AI stuff. There's a lot more, what's a better way to say it? Edge computing devices being compromised, all your checkpoint firewalls, your Palo Altos, things like that. So that's probably where if you're starting a new project today to build exploits, you'd probably focus on, web applications or cloud configuration problems or targeting some of these embedded devices.
That's so cool. I imagine that, that's really cool.
Well, in the world of cybersecurity, there are pen testers that are the red team, and they are blue team testers that are more in the defensive way. In our courses and in our community, the people are always getting aggressive or always getting like in the offensive security. There is not a lot of interest in the blue team or defensive security. How can we can incentive or make more creative to the young hackers and in way that they are more defensive and they are blue teamers, not only fans of the red team offensive security?
That's a good question. I think one of the reasons that people gravitate towards offense is because all you need is one exploit and you're a hacker, right? All you need is one way to bypass something, and that's all you need. You can break into something with one technique. But if you're on the blue team and defending, you need to protect against everything. You need to learn so much. And it's also not as much fun, in my opinion. Like hacking things is way more fun than preventing people from hacking things. So I'd say that one way to get blue team more excited is by building out better tools. I feel like where blue teams really excel is noticing patterns and building better tools to make defense faster, better, more efficient, et cetera. And that's where I think you can get people more excited about blue team work.
Básicamente nos comenta que pues deben de ser más las herramientas de blue teaming las que se estén desarrollando para que también el interés de los desarrolladores y de los hackers más jóvenes se vayan por ese lado.
What has been the biggest challenge you've faced working in cybersecurity throughout your career?
I mean, the biggest challenge with cybersecurity is you're not, you still have to work within the rest of the business. So you're kind of stuck with the same economy, the same funding problems, the same type of customers. Like you could build the coolest security thing in the world, but no one will buy it because there's no regulatory driver. There's no penalty for not doing it. So, you know, as much as we love cybersecurity, we're still kind of stuck working within the framework of, you know, the current business environment and funding environment.
Perfect. Maybe this isn't the most appropriate question if any authority is listening, but if given the chance to hack any system without repercussions, which one would you choose? Why?
Well, for me, like hacking is more about learning new stuff. And, you know, there's some systems that you'll never get access to. No one's ever going to let you log into, you know, a supercomputer or a giant old mainframe that's really important running like an airline system. So if I had the ability to, you know, get access to something with no repercussions, it would probably be space equipment. It would probably be satellites or robots or something else off in space someplace, because I think that's really fun and you'll never get a chance to touch it otherwise.
Bien, nos comenta un poco que si pudiera hacerlo, te lo haría también ya con robots o con cosas físicas, que no solamente con la parte de hardware, lo cual me parece muy interesante. Bien, my next question is about cybercrime. Here in Mexico, there is a lot of cybercrime, especially the carding type, the guys that are taking a lot of ATMs and they are stealing from our banks. So here in Mexico, there is a type of police, we call it the cyber police of Policía Cibernética, that is not very efficient and there is not very well talent or not very well trained. What is your advice for the cyber police here in Mexico or another way that we can fight the cybercrime?
You know, if you look at the United States about 15 years ago, very, very similar, right? The people who are doing cybercrime for law enforcement didn't have backgrounds in computers. They were just, you know, a cop who got assigned to doing cyber. And you didn't have folks joining, you know, the FBI because they knew computers and wanted to detect hackers. You had people joining the FBI to catch criminals, and then they had to learn computers. So that's really the challenge. So it wasn't until US law enforcement really started focusing on recruiting and paying better and making it more flexible and saying, you know, you can live in these multiple areas. You don't have to go through this kind of boot camp or training. We don't care whether you smoked weed 20 years ago, like things like that, that otherwise open the door to more people being able to work for law enforcement, but also wanting to work for law enforcement. So short version is pay better. Second version is make it easier to apply.
Comenta un pequeño detalle en el que, pues sí, la policía cibernética no está muy bien pagada y realmente los sueldos deberían de incentivar para que las personas no vayan hacia el lado del cibercrimen. Adelante, Debu.
What do you think about the impact Metasploit has had on penetration testing and security auditing in businesses?
The one thing I'm most proud of with Metasploit is just how many people we helped get jobs. So folks who, you know, had a hacker handle and they, you know, worked with us, they contributed an exploit module, we worked with them, we got their name on it, and we use that to basically as a resume to get their first security job. And there's hundreds of people like that. I mean, when I was still running the project, we had like 350 contributors and many more now. So I love the community aspect. I think that's the most important. The second aspect, though, is making it normal, making it a standard tool, making exploits being just another tool like Nmap you pick up and use, and not something that should be like, you know, policed or commercial or, you know, otherwise like you have to pay money for, have a license to use, right? So those are the two things I care about the most there.
Bien, nos comenta un poquito de que hay que hacer las cosas simples, mantenerlas fáciles y accesibles, que si realmente Metasploit hubiera sido un proyecto extremadamente difícil de utilizar, las personas no lo harían, que tiene que ser algo como usar Nmap o usar cualquier herramienta de Kali Linux en general.
Okay, a question that may be somewhat more theoretical, but what of the 5 steps in the pen testing process, which is one do you find most important? For example, for me, is reconnaissance, since I focus a lot on OSINT. So for you, what is?
Kind of the one thing that's worked really well my entire career is finding the one thing either no one else knows about, like it's an equipment that just it's a tape robot library that picks up backup tapes, or it's a DSL modem that someone forgot about and it's sitting in a closet someplace. So I usually look for not just kind of the front door for the business, not like their website, their application. Like you can do that stuff, that's fun. But I like finding kind of the weird thing in the corner that no one even realizes is there, and then attacking that because I feel like it's just much more effective, and honestly, it's less work.
The question is about your inspiration about creating Metasploit. What is your inspiration about doing that framework?
In the early days, it was very much like software vendors were wrong, and I wanted to prove it. So they were being, irresponsible. Microsoft in particular was absolutely terrible about both recognizing research, fixing things, fixing them quickly. They were just jerks to researchers for a very long time, and arguably still are in some cases. And so a lot of Metasploit was just dropping exploits again and again and again and again to say like, no, you have to make better software, or we're going to keep doing it.
Muy bien, nos comenta que pues prácticamente el hecho es de que estemos como que haciendo las cosas más eficientes en la parte de pen testing y no solamente lanzando ahora sí que exploits uno tras otro sin tener ahora sí que ningún grado de eficiencia. My next question is about maybe not your inspiration, but how do you keep motivated in the time, in the years? You are like, or a god here in the hacking community. Maybe you have a lot of fans. You are like a figure, like Fyodor and Nmap creators. Ahora sí que we get growing admiring you in this community, but you are still in the road, you are still in the game. So what is your advice or your tip for us to be in this hacking lifestyle or in this cybersecurity career and keep doing in the years?
I mean, the hard part is getting time, right? Like if you have to pay the bills and do your work and all that, there's only so much you can spend time on cool research. So early on, I would, work all day and then work on Metasploit all night. And it was 2 jobs every day, and I just didn't sleep very much. And I worked all weekend. So my friends would go party. I just spend all weekend writing exploits. And it just is what it is. It's kind of what I like doing. So even now, I probably spend a good 4 hours a day just doing neat researchy stuff, writing code. And then I do my day job. Even though my day job is my own company, I still try to make time for that other stuff. So I've got like, piles of computers, soldering irons, all kinds of fun toys that I just take apart. You just got to keep it going, I think. So I would say the best advice though is try to find a job that lets you continue learning and continue doing where you want to go. Otherwise, you're constantly fighting to get time from work to do what you want to be doing.
Bien, algo de lo que nos comenta es que prácticamente el tiempo es de lo más pues ahora sí que más apreciado de conseguir y que tiene que dividir mucho su trabajo profesional, aparte de seguir creando Metasploit, lo cual pues obviamente es de mucha admiración para todos nosotros, la forma en la que administra el tiempo al crear una de las herramientas más populares del mundo del pentesting.
Okay, did you ever imagine that Metasploit would become as relevant as it is today in the cybersecurity industry?
No, early on, everyone thought it was a joke and thought it was stupid. They're like, "Oh, it's for script kiddies. It's terrible. Why are you doing this thing?" The vendors hated it. My employer hated it. The black hats hated it. No one liked it. But it's just you just keep doing it, and I did it anyways because it's fun. And eventually, it became the standard, but not because early on it meant anything. Early on, it was just me kind of raging against the world and saying, "I want to do this because I want to do this." So definitely was very surprised, but also very happy that it survived and that it's still something people use today. And most of the goals we set up of making exploits available, of doing exploit development kind of transparently in the open, those all succeeded.
That's correct. I want to say that Metasploit was my first tool to compromise Windows 7 with the MS 17 0. I don't remember now, but the most Samba protocol, SMBM protocol. That's my first use of Metasploit. I want to make you a question of him that from a member called says that is how can the cybersecurity industry effectively utilize generative AI and how much of the current hype is genuine for you?
There's only a few use cases for AI that seem useful right now. And it's not what everyone's spending time on, right? Like generating English text and photos, sure, whatever. Where Gen AI is actually helpful is creating like fuzz test cases or creating something that you can automatically verify. So the problem with a lot of the LLMs is that if you're knowledgeable enough to know when they're wrong, you don't need them. And if you don't know enough to know if they're wrong, you can't use them or you'll be wrong. So you need to have a scenario where the LLM gives you output that you can automatically verify. And if you can't automatically verify by, say, running a code test or running an exploit or running the fuzz case, it can't really help you very much. There's a limit to how useful it'll be.
Well, my next question is about the hacker culture. Here in Mexico, we have a problem, and not only Mexico, in Latin America, that is called the corruption, and maybe that people that don't deserve the work or have a good job, they have it because they know someone or a family member that is in that office. So for the hackers and these advices, how can we construct our internal hacker? It's about the story, it's about the talent you have when you're born. A hacker can be created, or a hacker is only a hacker when as a born.
Let's see. I think kind of, well, tell me if this may be the wrong answer for what you're looking for, but early on, I couldn't get a job working for a big company because I didn't go to college. I didn't have, I barely had a high school diploma, and no experience. And so I got lucky. And what I did instead is just kept starting new companies. So instead of having to get someone else to hire me and convince someone else that I was worth hiring, I just started a company with my friends and we just built our own company and did that many times in a row. And so, arguably, I could never get a job at Google, but I can start my own company. And, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's one way to do it. It's just, if no one else will hire you, you start a consulting firm and you do build it yourself.
Bien, lo que nos dijo fue muy inspirador. Dice que pues prácticamente él no aspira a trabajar en Google porque pues en la parte de los estudios formales él decidió irse por otro lado más profesional. Él tiene su empresa y incita a todos los hackers a que pues hagan sus startups, a que hagan sus proyectos y que no necesariamente esperen a ser contratados por una empresa o un gobierno para poder ahora sí que aflorar sus habilidades.
I'd say the one problem with starting your own business, though, is then instead of just hacking all day, you're doing invoicing and customers and marketing and sales and taxes and all that stuff, and then doing a little bit of hacking. So the trade-off is you get to control your destiny, but the other side is you have to learn the rest of the business stuff too.
Who were the people or mentors that influenced you early in your career?
Yeah, quite a few. Tim Newsham, Tom Chachek, Jordan Ritter. Tim Newsham and Tom Chachek, they wrote the first evading an IPS paper or IDS paper. That was really good. Jordan Ritter worked at Napster for a bit, but he's the guy who basically told me how to write Perl code, and I annoyed him all the time. Basically all the folks who were like 2 or 3 years older than me who did it first. And then of course you have all the folks like Team Teso, LSDPL, all those folks in the old hacking communities who are just awesome, ADM crew. Fyodor, of course, Gordon, he's a good friend of mine. And, I look up to him and he's definitely kind of a mentor for how to build the community, how to build kind of a long-standing open source, community around your project. But yeah, lots of them for sure. But yeah, lots of really smart folks out there who are really generous with their time and put up with this annoying kid pinging them on IRC all the time, asking dumb questions about Perl.
Okay, I have a question. You have the most up-to-date perspective. You maybe know that the company are looking for today. You are an idol in the hacking world. So what recommendations would you give to someone who is just starting out? What's maybe, I don't know, certification they aim for?
So I don't have any certifications and I haven't had any. So I mean, sometimes you need them for a job. If you're working for a bigger company, you often have to get a certification. If you're working even for a consulting company that's small, you may still need a certification because their customers want to see CISSP or OSCP or something like that. But the way I typically hire people and the kind of people I look for are folks who go do their own work, who publish great blog posts or write security tools or talk about cool projects on Twitter or whatever, or Mastodon. Basically looking for people who go out of their way to show that they really love what they're doing and they want to learn more and they share that with more people. And that's I put it this way, the places that I've hired the most people have been like social media, like like Slack or IRC. That's where I find people. You just see them talking all day. So you get to know them before you have to decide to hire them. You know how they interact, you know how smart they are, you know what they're learning about. You get to kind of see them for a little while first. That's the best place to hire. But also local hacker meetups. So sorry for the long answer. In Austin, we have a hacker meetup called AHA, and it's Austin Hackers Anonymous. And once a month, we put a bunch of hackers in a room and we talk about stuff, and it's like Fight Club. You can't talk about what you see there. But because of that, we bring a lot of new people in all the time. And we've hired probably, just my own companies have hired about 30 people just out of the AHA meetup because we get to know them really well. They have to present. We see what they learn about. We kind of watch them grow. So it's really just getting to know people. So if you're looking for a job, go join all those social medias. Go get involved with like a Discord, Slack for security, chat about stuff. Share what you're working on. Make it clear what you love and what you care about, and that's the best way to find a job.
Perfect. So do you think that it's better to do things that grab attention and learn out of patience for patience? Sorry. Thanks.
I'm going to have a question about your company, Runzero. I have been trying the software and your platform, and it's very, very, very well. You have like a community edition for 100 seats or 100 assets. Can you explain more about this platform and what is your visualization or your plans for the future in this platform?
Sure. So runzero.com, that's my company, working on it for about 6 years. First 3 years was mostly by myself and just kind of getting the product and building it and all that. Then started hiring people, and now we've got a great team. But what we do is we help you find everything. So you can go into a company that you know nothing about, plug into the wall, and immediately see everything anywhere, everywhere across the whole company. And we do that by crawling networks through passive sniffing, active scan, integrations. And the idea is we want to show you everything from every perspective. So you can see all of your inside stuff, all your outside stuff, your cloud, your mobile all together, how it connects together, and of course, how to attack it, right? So it's not really a vulnerability scan. It's much more of like asset inventory / exposure management. So it's kind of a weird tool, but what I love about it is we take all the really cool techniques from the last 25 years of hacking, and we use them for like really cool discovery. We find multi-homed assets. We can tell you like we can do really precise fingerprinting of devices. So it's a really fun project. It's kind of like hacking except for the exploits in a lot of ways. You're just doing all the recon work, but not the exploit part.
Bien, quiero comentar un poco lo que nos explicó de su plataforma. Básicamente, si ustedes entran a runzero.com, tienen una parte donde se llama Community Edition y por así que la plataforma donde lo hacen para la versión empresarial o gobierno. Yo les recomiendo que utilicen esto, les caben hasta 100 assets, o sea, pueden controlar básicamente 100 agentes o 100 computadoras y sirve mucho para la visualización, para la observabilidad, para hacerlo como plataforma como si fuera manejo de riesgos, y también puedes de cierta manera tener como toda la cuestión del rendimiento. Es como si fuera una especie de, vamos a llamarle como plataforma de observabilidad, como si fuera un Splunk, pero un poco más dedicado porque ellos han manejado todo lo que saben de la parte de hacking para poder hacer un agente muy robusto que se conecte y que mande como estas métricas que están lanzando ahora sí que toda tu organización y puedas como controlarla en una sola plataforma unificada. Seguimos.
How have you seen the cybersecurity landscape evolve from when you start to today?
Definitely. In the early days, it was very much security companies were by security people. Like you don't start a security company unless you were a hacker or at least you really like security. These days, though, security companies are just any other software. So people look at security as like, oh, that's where good money is. I'm going to go make security software, but they don't know anything about security. They don't care about it. It's not their life. It's not what they love. So there's definitely a lot of security companies that are just software companies that don't really care about the security side. So that's the sad part. I feel like, we're in a spot now where a lot of the security products aren't really made by people who care a lot about security. They're just there to sell you a annual contract.
Okay. I have a maybe personal question, but I want to know what is for you your most memorable experience or change you have faced while working on security research project.
It's a bunch of fun ones. It's always interesting when you see like because at Metasploit we made all our code open so anyone could download it, and occasionally criminals would reach out and either ask for things or share things. So there's a really fun one a long time ago, right around Christmas. What was it, 2006, something like that? There was a vulnerability in EMF or WMF file format that was just run code arbitrary in every Windows machine. Just open a file, run code. It was great. Any kind of, as long as you can get someone to open EMF file, it was run code. So this exploit was launched kind of like during holidays, late one year, everyone's panicking, freaking out, et cetera. About a month later, I got an email from a random Russian email address, and it was a picture of a license of a Mercedes-Benz 600 series parked in the middle of traffic, just with a guy standing in front of it with a license plate that had a bunch of like numbers and digits in it. And I was like, okay, why did you send me this? This is weird. And he's like, no, look at the EMF exploit. So I go back and look at the EMF exploit that was in the wild, the one that actually was hacking everybody. And hexing like XOR encoded with OX90, OX90, OX90 XOR was his license plate. So in the original EMF exploit, the Russian exploit developer put his license plate number and then got a photo of himself in front of his car in front of the Kremlin and sent me the photo in early 2007. So that was just really bizarre and fun.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
Well, my next question is about the hackers that are young, that are ready to study. There is a lot of ways to study cybersecurity or hacking. There is a lot of podcasts, there are books, there are like labs, and these virtual machines or capture the flags. What is your way of study? What can you advise to the young hackers to study cybersecurity and hacking?
It's much harder to get into security these days, I think. The good part about having a terrible modem and slow internet in the 1990s is anything you did, you had a lot of time to do it. You had to go read the documents, you had to dial up again, you had to download really slow. But there was no Twitter, there's no distraction, right? You're just only looking at one screen and there's not a lot else going on. So it was very easy to focus because you didn't have 1,000 things going on at once. There's also like you only had access to so much stuff. You can only hack things you can get access to, like maybe install Windows NT, maybe set up Unix, whatever. But these days, you can do anything. You can go hack the cloud, you can do web apps, you can do mobile, RF, wireless. So I think it's really hard these days because there's lots of distractions and the field is so massive. It's really hard to pick one area and go do it. So what I recommend anybody is one, learn a programming language. Doesn't matter which one, just know one. Whether it's Perl, Python, Ruby, Go, Rust, pick one, learn that, get good at it. That's all that matters, just pick one. And two, then pick an area you really want to go deep on. Because where you can get a job, where you can really kind of show your skill, is when you go deep enough into a particular area that you know something other people don't. And you only do that by spending more time than somebody else would, right? There's a magician quote saying, the reason people believe magic is that no one would ever expect you to go through so much effort for such a trivial thing. And that's a paraphrasing. There's a much better quote. But essentially, like, if you spend a lot of time on one little thing that no one else looks at, you'll be the best at that one thing. But the hard part is staying focused.
Bien, nos comenta un poquito de la especialización que hay que dedicarle ahora. No es como antes aprender en el hacking, que tenías como que muchos recursos y mucho tiempo. Hay que ser muy especialista y que pues eso, que aprendan a programar, que no es algo para saltarse, no importa qué lenguaje de programación quieran, que agarren uno, que se lo perfeccionen para poder llegar lejos en el hacking.
How do you see the evolution of asset discovery in cybersecurity, and what makes Runzero stand out compared to other solutions?
So asset inventory, the buzzword is convergence, which means everything's kind of getting mixed together. So your operational technology, your factories, your medical devices, your wireless, your cloud, it's all in one spot now. It's all kind of being managed by IT teams, where before each of those teams were different and they didn't really talk to each other. Now they're all interconnected. So for asset inventory, you really need to understand everything, not just your OT, not just your IT, not just your cloud, but how it all fits together and how it connects. So with Runzero, what we try to focus on is that, right? We try to do that really, really well across OT, across IT. We built a custom scan engine that I love Nmap, but we don't use Nmap, right? We built a custom scanner from scratch for everything, and it's designed to be very safe so that you can scan medical equipment, you can scan factories, and you don't crash things. So we spent a lot of time just not crashing stuff. That's the hard part.
Okay, perfect. I was saying, so it was spinning around my head. My favorite vulnerability is MS17010, that is Eternal Blue, because have a really cool history. So I can ask you, do you have a favorite vulnerability? That's maybe a weird question, but
Oh, like that was the vulnerability that was leaked by what was it? Shadow Brokers, or it was Vault 7. It was one of like the intelligence leaks, I think, right?
exactly. That is.
Yeah, it was pretty clearly a Western states code, and it was pretty clearly leaked by Eastern Europeans. So that probably sums it up.
Well, my next question is about how to get secure for the enterprises and governments. Now, in these days, there are a lot of tactics that doing pen testing, that doing auditing, maybe have a firewall intruder detection system or prevention systems, data loss prevention systems, but there is like a very rainy or not very clear to the companies how I can get secure. There is a zero trust practice or methodology, but not all the companies can get it done. So what is your advice in order to have a hardware or software that are in your company and doing the defensive things?
The short version is these days, you're going to have an agent on every machine no matter what. That's just kind of the state of things. So you really have two kinds of equipment. You've got equipment that has an agent where you're doing EDR, you're doing monitoring, XDR, you can do DLP, all that fun stuff. And you have everything else that can't have an agent on it, that there's no way for you to get that kind of monitoring. So, the challenge is, one, make sure that your agent is good, whatever it happens to be, whether you're buying, one software or another. Make sure that when there's a breach, you know what happens, you know what data was taken, you know where it went. Hopefully you can prevent the breach too, but at least know what happens when it happens. And then for everything else, all of your stuff that can't run an agent, your vendor appliances, your switches, your racks, your firewalls, all that fun stuff, like you need telemetry, you need enough data from those products going someplace that you can look for it, like a SIM, so that when something happens to them, you know that happens and that you can detect, when a breach happened. The problem right now is that most network equipment is just kind of a black hole. Like people are breaking into networks through the firewall, through the security systems, because that's actually the easiest point in these days. And sometimes those machines don't log enough to be able to tell what happened. So my advice, of course, my advice would be make sure you got an agent, everything you can have an agent on, and then two, make sure everything else is reporting to a central SIM or log or someplace just to be able to, hopefully detect a breach. But if you don't detect it up front, be able to investigate what happened after.
Bien, prácticamente pues nos comenta que si al menos no podemos prevenir que pues todos podemos ser hackeados o no hay nada 100% seguro, que si entran a tu máquina o a tu organización, que tengas todo con agentes, todo medido, todo logueado y monitoreado para que al menos pueda hacer un traceback y el cómputo forense necesario.
What's the biggest technical challenge you faced while developing Runzero?
I mean, for me, the hard part is always UX. It's the user interface. It's the stuff you click. Like I'm bad at that. So that for me is the hardest part. How do I make something that people can actually use that gets people to the goal? Because what I want from the product is just the data, right? I just want to see a giant grid of numbers and I'm happy. But customers usually want to have some, reports and dashboards and things like that. So that to me is the hardest part. The technically hard part, I think, well, UX is also technical, but the really fun, crafty stuff for us is like, how do you detect if a device is running Red Hat Linux versus CentOS or Fedora? They're identical, same binary, same everything, right? So how do you tell them apart? So that kind of work, I think, is the really challenging stuff that I like.
I understand you. That's so difficult to me, center div today. So my question is, being such a widely used tool, Metasploit, both for good and for bad, I want to ask you something that has been on my mind. How do you confront situation when it's used for malicious purpose, or what is your reaction when something like this happens?
I mean, I guess that's the point, right? Like, if it couldn't be used for something bad, why do it? What's the value? I mean, the reason why people care about Metasploit is because you can use it for bad. If all it was a defensive tool, no one would care. No one would think about it. No one would put any time into it, right? So because for a long time, folks would say, well, when there's an exploit in Metasploit, that's when I care about it. And that was a way to force companies to care about a vulnerability, right? So if there's a new vulnerability in Internet Explorer or in some appliance or something, you see the advisory, you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. But when there's a Metasploit module, now you have to be serious about it, right? So it's a way for us to help the rest of the world focus on it. It's not really that case anymore. What happened about 2010 or so was that Metasploit stopped being the ones pushing the exploit first. We started being the ones following the black hats. And that's still the case today. So black hats will exploit a bunch of vulnerabilities, they'll take over a bunch of machines, and then there's a Metasploit module for it. So Metasploit is almost always on the defense these days because it's always the tool that you use after the black hats have already found and exploited the vulnerability.
Well, the red team, it's advancing in these days, the tactics. What are your opinion about software like Counter-Strike, Power Empire, and more C2 for red teaming? What is your next view for Metasploit? Have you ever going to develop Metasploit? Or is like for you, I like the Linux Torvalds for Linux. I hope you have a very good health, but in your future, do you plan to still developer being the main developer for Metasploit for a long time?
I haven't really worked on it much in about 7 years, 8 years, something like that. I took a break. I was like, I did that for 15 years. I want to do something else for a while. So at least 6, 7 years now. So these days I spend all my time on Runzero doing packet stuff and discovery and things like that, and I love it. I love that Rapid7 is still supporting Metasploit and there's a big Metasploit community. I'm also very happy that I don't have to run it every day anymore. It's just a lot of work. So it's nice to see it continuing to thrive without me. But I love open source projects. I wish what I was doing now was more open source, but it is what it is on the business side right now. But I'm hoping to be able to go back and do more open source work eventually.
Sí, nos comenta que pues va a hacer más trabajo de open source, que actualmente Metasploit es más mantenido por la empresa Rapid7.
Okay, looking ahead, what trends do you think will shape the future of cybersecurity, and how do you see Runzero adapting to this change?
So one of the problems with cybersecurity is that when people see a new trend, so Gen AI, EDR, agents, next gen firewall, zero trust, they assume that everyone's going to go do that everyone will go do that today. But then there's the rest of the world that will never do that, right? So, Runzero was weird in that we decided to do on-prem network discovery first, where everyone else was doing cloud and only cloud. And everyone's like, why aren't you doing cloud? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, you need all your other stuff is still going to be there on site. You go to a hospital, there's still going to be equipment. You go to a factory, there's still robots. There's still, all the machines you need. So I think what happens is that oftentimes security teams overcorrect for the new stuff and they forget about like all the boring old stuff that's going to be there forever. So with Runzero, we really try to make sure that we cover all of it, whether it's your new cloud stuff or whether it's your giant, robot building cars in your factory.
Okay. I have a curiosity. A curious. One of those questions that you sometimes ponder in your life. So like, what will the creator of Metasploit do today? So what do you enjoy doing in your free time? How do you organize your time to make a lot of things?
My family is very nice to me and lets me go be a nerd and generally, hide in the corner of my lab and do fun things. So, I think trying to make sure that you get to do some fun stuff at work is really important. Like it's much easier to justify spending 3 or 4 hours taking apart a hardware or writing code or doing protocol dissection if you can also use it for your job. So for me, it's trying to how do I line up my research projects to also be helpful for work and vice versa, so that I kind of get, double the value. I get to get some work value out of it, but also have fun.
Well, my next question is about the data loss prevention and about especially the leaks. When a company get hacked, here in Mexico, there is a lot of hacked companies and governments. Their attackers or cyber criminals always put and upload the information of all the people that is getting the leak. So the ransomware projects or cyber criminals behind cyber ransomware are getting the leaks as main objective. What is your opinion about a company that get leaked? For example, if you are a member of T-Mobile and that company gets leaked, do you still working with that company? Or maybe if you are working with GitHub and you have all your software and code in GitHub and GitHub gets hacked, what about that? Maybe we are not taking the main approach about the leaks. What are your opinion?
I think the big problem with leaks, especially with large companies, that there's no alternative to go to. Like you can decide to not use GitHub anymore, but then it's a pain to work with other people. You can decide to not use your telephone company, but there's only maybe 2 other telephone companies in your whole country that you can work with. So if they all get hacked, what are you going to do, right? I mean, they're all going to get hacked eventually. And in the US, I think there's been at least one major breach for every major telecom in the last 5 years. So, on one hand, it would be great if everyone was perfect and this stuff didn't happen. On the other hand, you don't really have a lot of choice as a customer or person. My advice these days is just expect the leak, make sure it doesn't matter. So, pass keys are a great way to fix password leaks. You need the hardware token to, log in. That helps with some of that stuff. But when it comes to personal information, I mean, it's hopeless. Like every US citizen's information is lost many times already. It's all just floating out there. The National Public Data one was massive. All the OMB breaches were massive. I had random Russians signaling my social security number to me and sending it to me just for fun. I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, it's just one of those things where the way that we're going to solve this problem isn't by preventing the leak, it's by making the data useless. One follow-on note is I was talking to insurance brokers recently for cyber insurance, and they were saying they don't think they will cover leaks anymore going forward. So insurance will cover ransomware where it's encrypted, where your company can't work, but they don't want to cover losses or ransom payments for data leaks. They don't think it's worth doing. They say, how about we just don't do that? Let's make it illegal. So some folks in the insurance industry are lobbying to make paying for what they call double extortion or data leaks illegal on the insurance side, which will have the side effect of no longer making that profitable. So if people stop paying for it, people will stop doing it.
Bien, nos comenta brevemente que pues en la parte de los leaks lo ve como algo pues bastante dañino, pero que de forma lamentable pues han sido tantas las compañías que caen en los leaks que incluso te quedan muy pocas alternativas para tú brincarte a otra. Pongamos el ejemplo de México, o sea, si hackean ahora sí que la SEP, que es la que maneja todos los datos del gobierno y es solamente una institución educativa, pues ahí se va todo. Allá en Verizon Wireless, Telefónica, Movistar, o sea, hay ciertos... pues ahora sí que empresas que manejan casi toda la mayoría y el conglomerado de los datos, que pues prácticamente lo que debes de hacer es que la información cuando la hackeen no sea tan útil y que desde el punto de vista del cyber insurance, que es un dato muy bueno que nos hace saber, ya no van a estar viendo como algo relevante la parte de los leaks. Igual si es por ransomware o por encriptamiento, que ahí sí cubre un poco más, pero la parte de los leaks no tanto.
Hector, I have a question about this for HD. So do you think hacking is progressively deviating from its original purpose, especially with the constant emergence of ransomware groups and carding groups, which are a significant problem here in Latin America?
I mean, there's always going to be some way to get money from hacking, right? It's just a question of what it is. So for a while, it was Monero and Bitcoin mining or crypto coin mining, and these days it could be GPU stuff, it could be data leaks, but there's always going to be something that you can get value from by hacking in, right? It could be selling someone early tickets to Taylor Swift. It could be things like that. So there's so many ways you can abuse hacking powers to make money and to get something you shouldn't. That the current way people will make money by hacking is going to go away, but there'll always be something new.
What role does automation play in Runzero and your future projects?
So automation is one of those fun things where you want to have you want a lot of things to be set and forget. You want to be able to set things up and say, I will always get this data coming in. I can rely on this data always showing up and always having this visibility and this monitoring. But it's not something where people are really comfortable automating responses these days. I think Gartner decided that SOAR, SOAR was dead recently. And there's lots of SOAR companies doing great, but SOAR, it's one of those things where you're trying to automate your security operation response. And it's really hard to automate it beyond a few steps. Like, sure, you can disconnect a machine or send an alert or create a ticket, but it's really difficult to get to the point that you're doing full automated remediation. It's really hard to get that full closed loop of hands off where a security problem happens and it fixes itself. That's something that we're still pretty far away from. So right now, most people on the automation side are very focused on just giving you all the data reliably and helping you make decisions and prioritize it, but not quite closing the loop yet with remediation.
Okay, I have a question. I would love to know, do you have any idols from the underground or mainstream hacking scene that you all have met in person? And so, whoa, I used to watch you in videos or something like this.
Yeah, I think probably trying to think the first one I ran into. Probably the first time I was starstruck in person was I was in Kuala Lumpur at Hack in the Box in 2003. My first time, going to Malaysia or Southeast Asia, and the LSD PL team was there, like all four of them, and their girlfriends. It was amazing. So I got to meet all of the LSD PL people, and they were some of the smartest Polish, smartest hackers ever, but also smart Polish hackers. And it was really cool to meet them in person and be like, oh, we're just a bunch of nerds. They're not that scary, but not very nice people.
I understand totally. It's one of these moments for me. So
My next question is about the gadgets now in hacking. We have for example, the Flipper Zero, the Hack RF, and a lot of tools like Hack 5 Pineapple that is very well designed. So what is your opinion about these gadgets? Because some people here in Latin America say that if you are hacking with these devices, it's like you are cheating, for example. And you need to do ensembler and do C++ and do all the coding and know how to do hardware hacking and Linux embedded devices. But how do you think about that? Maybe if you open a garage door with a flipper server, it's not a bad thing. And maybe these gadgets are making and involving more people into hacking.
Yeah, anybody who says that, don't use that because it's lame or it's shitty, they're just scared. They're scared about not being relevant and they're scared that they're going to have to learn. They feel like, well, I spent all this effort and time learning this. I don't want other people to be able to do that without spending that same time. And that's not how it works, right? We always want to make it easier for the next generation to do better than us. The whole point of Metasploit was, here's a thing that you can improve, that you can make better. Metasploit as an open source project came out because I wrote some really crappy code. Someone on the internet came up and said, your code sucks. And I was like, okay, you fix it. He's like, okay, I will. And so he did. And that was Spoon N. That's who joined the project. So you always want to be a situation where you're trying to improve things. And you're also trying to make it easier for the next people to learn and to get there. And two other good examples I'd like to point to are Scapy, the Python toolkit for raw packets. that allowed so much more research than before. If everyone had to write their own raw packet library, nobody would do any research in raw packets. But because Scapy existed, it opened the door for all this other cool stuff. Similar, Impacket was another great library that was really, important on the Python side. And I like to think some of the Metasploit libraries were like that too, that we let you talk to really weird protocols or do SMB or things like that, that if you had to build an SMB protocol stack from scratch, it would take months. But if we build it for you, then you can build cool things on top of that. You can go so much further. So yeah, I would say anybody who says, it's lame or whatever, that's just them being scared about losing their own, authority or status.
Looking back, is there a project or tool you didn't pursue that in hindsight you wish you had developed?
I mean, there's infinite stuff out there, right? All like core impact is really cool. I don't think Metasploit ever got anywhere near as cool as some of the core impact stuff. They just did a lot of really neat things no one else has done to date. All the Wi-Fi stuff out there, like Kismet and Dragon's work is amazing. All the aircraft stuff is really cool. So there's lots of really cool projects I wish I had time to work on, but it's okay. Like you don't have to do everything. You can go pick, a little narrow area. So I like to joke these days, all I do these days is make ping packets, and that's okay.
Okay, I would like to know, you have achieved great things for our community and for the world. Aside from things like war peace and that things, what would you like to accomplish in the near or distant future?
I mean, I think of a lot of my work stuff is very much trying to like help people see their network differently. So like the way, if I go and like, if as a hacker, you go into a company and you look at the network, you're going to see it one way. But if you're an employee, the IT person, someone else, you see it very differently. Like a good example would be Bloodhound, right? Your IT team thinks your authentication works like this, but your hacker knows you can just jump between the levels and go anywhere you want because you have transitory trust. So, a good example is the most important computer in most companies is the IT administrator's laptop, not your server, not anything else. It's the IT guy's laptop because he's got credentials to everything else, right? So it's helping people understand those type of relationships. It also, that happens on the network side too. What point in the network is actually the most sensitive? Well, it could be actually your guest network. If your guest network can talk to the management port of your switch, and your switch is the thing enforcing VLANs and doing segmentation, well, you can just change the segmentation. So a good example, I did a pen test that was a PCI credit card processor, and we just modified the ASA firewall to open a hole in the firewall and let ourselves in. And we did that by breaking into the SolarWinds machine, which had the credentials to the firewall. So even though the SolarWinds machine wasn't really related to the PCI side, because we were able to take the credential from SolarWinds, use that on the firewall, open the hole in the firewall, that was all we needed to break in. So helping people understand those types of relationships is what I want to spend my time on.
Sí, prácticamente nos está comentando que a veces queremos ver que todo está en el servidor, así con Windows Server, y queremos ubicar como que toda la información y protegerlo del servidor, pero que puede estar en la laptop del ingeniero de redes o una laptop más simple que tiene todas las credenciales y de ahí poderlo utilizar para una escalación de privilegios. My next question is about our pen testing tools that we use every day. We use, obviously, Metasploit, we use Nmap, but the pen testers love Kali Linux, and there is maybe like a war in this cybersecurity world that some people is that, don't use Kali Linux, that is for lame people, I use Parrot Security, or maybe you need to use R Linux or Gentoo to be a ultra uber hacker lead. So what is your opinion about Kali Linux and these tools that embed and recollect all the information security tools that we use every day?
I mean, my take is you don't have very much time. Like on a pen test, you only have like so many hours to do the work. So whatever's fastest, like you're not there to show how cool you are. You're there to break in. So however you break in the quickest is best.
Sí, que realmente tienes poco tiempo para hacer un pen testing y que la forma en la que tú ahorres tiempo y hagas mejor tu trabajo está bien para él.
What trends or shifts in cybersecurity do you think might surprise people in the next few years?
Big one I'm seeing now is that there's very few people in security that know anything about networks anymore. A lot of people coming into cybersecurity now, they know about cloud, web applications, bug bounties, but they don't know what like layer 2 or VLAN or Ethernet switches or MTUs or framing or any of that fun stuff. It's kind of like a lost art now, because it's not something people like had to really learn about. Everyone's very used to like Docker containers and things like that, but they don't know very much about MPLS or WLANs or all that kind of fun stuff. So there's a lot of I think a lot of the low level stuff is now kind of being slowly lost to history, and there's very few people who are really good at that stuff anymore. And newer folks coming in the industry just don't get exposure to it because, a new company, you're not going to have a server anymore. Everything's going to be in the cloud, right? So you don't really have to worry about your Active Directory server. You don't have to worry about setting up Windows. You're just going to set up like a bunch of Macs and tell it to connect to the internet and call it done. So I think we're losing a lot of expertise in some of the networking layers for sure.
I think. What do you think about Latin American hackers? Who often have a limited resource. For example, it can be difficult to obtain certain tools. My second question is, have you given or would you like to give a conference here in Latin America, some country in specific, or I don't know, in a world tour for, sorry, a Latin American tour, for example?
Sorry, could you rephrase the first question again? I missed part of it.
Yes, my first question is, what do you think about Latin American hackers who often have limited resource?
Oh man, like some of the coolest hackers I know are from Latin America, right? I'm in RC, the whole Core Impact group, ERA, Hera, like Eco Party guys, like just fantastic community, right? So there's so much cool stuff. I mean, I think one of the problems that the US has is that because it's, easy, or there's more IT, or there's more corporate jobs in doing security, people just don't have to, I don't want to say try as hard, but they don't have to be as broad, they don't have to go as deep, they don't have to be as creative and resourceful because they walk in, they're given a big laptop and a AWS account and say, here you go, as opposed to having to go figure it out themselves and really fight for it and learn. So, I may be not being fair to US hackers, but I do feel like a lot of folks who started outside the US, because it was a little more difficult, because they had to work with less resources in some cases, you have a lot more, people are just a lot, they learn more, they go faster, they have to learn more to be able to do it. So I'm kind of grateful that I grew up kind of poor and in, the 90s when there was no internet, right? Because you had to go to learn it all as you go. It was a much different world to learn. So I'd say like some of that adversity, some of the kind of limited resources, especially for parts of the world that are not highly connected already, it's actually good for the hackers. The hackers have to learn more, have to get better at it, have to know more stuff. So you see some really cool, some really talented folks coming out of those environments.
Sí, pues nos comenta prácticamente que pues siente ahora sí que mucha simpatía por los hackers latinoamericanos y las personas que estamos acá, porque no tenemos tantos recursos y pues aún así estamos buscando, incentivándonos para aprender. Tenemos ahora sí que menos tiempo y nos vemos forzados a hacerlos más rápido. My next question is about artificial intelligence and mixed with cybersecurity. In these days, for pen testers, there's tools like Pen Tester GPT, and a lot for GPTs for hackers, and a lot of command injection for this type of for ChatGPT, for example. You can do that prompt injections and that kind of things. So these type of tools are very well designed for red teamers or for offensive security, but not really automated, because you talk with this kind of GPTs, they only give you suggestions about that. Is there a way in the future that artificial intelligence can take in your command line and maybe do that Metasploit commands, and they pass the output to Nmap and do that kind of things automated? So I, as a pen tester, left my work to the machine or left my work to the artificial intelligence. What are your expectations in the future?
I'm all for automation. So if you can point something at it and say, go find me bugs, go break in, that's great. So it saves you time. It lets you focus on the harder stuff or the more interesting stuff. We're not quite there yet. There's some tools. There's a commercial company called Expo that's getting very close to that. They're able to build kind of Gen AI that's focused at actually exploiting vulnerabilities, doing challenges, things like that. I think it's XPOW, I forgot the TLD, but they just came out of stealth recently. So that's an example of a company that they've made some really good claims about what they're able to do. But yeah, I mean, it's any other tool, right? So treat GenAI like you would Burp or, SQL Map or something like that. Set it up, point at it, hopefully get some results. If not, try harder, dig in. I would say be a little cautious though, because just like, one of my early screw ups with SQL Map is I accidentally deleted an entire customer's database. And I, found an injection, I put it in there, and because of the way the injection worked, it deleted the entire user account database for the customer in their live production. And they were not very happy about that. So, I mean, we have the same kind of problems with some of the Gen AI tools. Like it may do something you don't want it to do. You may cause damages, may whatever. So just be careful. But other than that, I mean, automation is great.
What are your favorite books, hacking and cybersecurity?
There's quite a few. I mean, early on, TCP/IP Illustrated was kind of how I learned how packets work and things like that. Programming in the Unix environment or Advanced Programming Unix environment, very good book as well for learning how Linux works and the Unix in general. Other books I like that are a little more like prose, I guess, would be Silence on the Wire by El Kemtoff or Michael Zalewski. That's a really cool book just because you can see how his brain works all the way through from like when you push the keyboards, what happens in the computer. Um, Ghost in the Wire from Kevin Mitnick was really interesting just because it talks about like all the crazy stuff he did when he like everything leading up to him going to prison, basically. So it was really neat to kind of like just see where his head was and how he's thinking about all that when all that stuff happened. I like a more of the historical books too. Like I've got all the old 2600s, the Blacklisted 1411, Phone Losers of America, some of the books on like MOD and LOD. So some of the historical stuff is a lot of fun to read. But these days, like I think books are really hard these days because it's really hard to buy a book now that's still relevant by the time you read it, right? It's really hard to write a book that's still relevant by the time you publish it. So, I mean, if you're a good example, if you go to like in the US, Barnes and Noble was like in the big bookstore everywhere. The computer book section of Barnes and Noble went from being very small to very big, being very small again. And it's the same thing. Almost every bookstore, physical bookstore in Austin, Texas, at least, has a very small computer book section because so much of it's no longer relevant so quickly. It just becomes useless so fast. So when you go to like the bookstore, it says like, here's PHP 4 book. It's like, okay, or ASP on like IAS. Like it's all these outdated technologies like Cold Fusion, right? So it's very tough to find good technical books unless they really cover the basics and the fundamentals. There's a series of books on like Postgres database indexes that I really love. So things like that, things that don't change very often. So if you're going to buy a book about something that's not going to change in the next year.
That's true. For example, here in Argentina, it's so difficult to both both from technology, from any type of technology. For example, how to programming in Java or C. That's so complicated. So I understand you. And my next question is: do you think that back again in the AI, do you think that artificial intelligence will replace you in pen testing, or will human genius prevail?
I mean, that's the goal, right? We want tools to replace part of what we have to do so we can work on better things. That's always the case, right? Do you want to be somebody who is clicking buttons all day in a web application, or do you want to be somebody writing the rules to make the AI better, right? So your job doesn't go anywhere. Your job just changes a little bit. Your job becomes the person who makes the AI work better or creates the rules or creates the system for it. So, I'm not particularly worried about any of this stuff. I feel like the more automation we can bring to bear, the better. It's just as long as you're willing to continue learning and continue kind of moving with the changes, I think it's okay. So, I started off writing Perl. I started off writing Basic and then Visual Basic and then Perl and then Ruby and now Go. And now the cool kids are all writing Rust. So I'll probably have to go learn Rust at some point. So it's just the nature of the beast. You have to just constantly switch to the next thing and get better at it.
Well, for my last question, it's about the movies and the hackers. We saw a lot Metasploit and Nmap in a lot of our popular hacker and a lot of movies. And what is your favorite movie about hacking or cybersecurity?
I mean, I think The Matrix probably still takes the cake for the best movie to feature Nmap for sure. Like it's just really cool to see the way they layered it in. It was realistic, all that fun stuff. There's been a lot of other movies that are okay, I guess, but I don't know. There's definitely none of them that jump out as being like the one, I guess, in that sense. So I would say like the first Matrix with Trinity using Nmap is probably the best.
For example, sorry, the Mr. Robot, do you like? Do you like Mr. Robot?
It was okay.
Maybe. It's okay.
I liked the first like 3 episodes, and then I got too drama-y. I don't watch much TV, so I was like, okay, like, I like reading books mostly, so.
Sí, nos comenta que pues, su película favorita es Matrix y que pues Mr. Robot estuvo bien los primeros 3 capítulos, pero que él es una persona que prefiere leer libros. Bien, I just want to extend a huge thanks for being your guest on our podcast. Your insights and experience in the community are the best. You are an idol and inspiring icon for this community. And here in Latin America, I hope that our members and the people of the Noob Sketch find this interesting. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you are a very, very worker and a very people that is always working and always ahead. And I don't know if you want to tell our Latin community a few words.
I mean, thank you very much for having me on. Definitely an honor to, thank you for translating. I have zero Spanish, so I really appreciate the help. Now I just say like, I love that security is global, right? Like most of the friends I made in the 90s were not in the US. There are people in Germany, there are people in Malaysia, Argentina. So it's really cool that like hackers are global, hackers are international. So thank you again.
Muchas gracias, HD More. Gracias a todos. Esto fue La Jaula del Noob.